In today's episode, we'll be talking about rezoning property from residential to commercial. It's all about upping the value, so stay tuned. Rezoning your residential property into commercial is a tool that you're going to love to have in your tool belt when the timing's right. We're going to learn some things to be aware of, examples of the exact right situations. Then I'm going to show you a case study of a successful rezoning and how much profit it resulted in. And then last but not least, I'm going to name the number one component, something you'll have to have before you even attempt to rezone a residential property to a commercial property. All right, you ready? Here we go. So when we talk about things to be aware of, the biggest obstacle is the size of the bureaucracy you're fixing to face. Now, you may be from a little town and it may be cut and dried and you may know everybody, or you may be from this big town where it's just a colossal obstacle. So that's the biggest thing to be aware of, that the bigger the bureaucracy, the longer it's going to take. More often than not, the powers that be are slow-moving, unmotivated, and very unenthusiastic for your cause. Hence the word bureaucracy. The red tape may be daunting at times, but let's always remember, we get paid for fixing situations, for solving problems, or for causing things to happen. You could get paid big for going through whatever it is you have to go through to rezone this property from residential to commercial. So don't ever lose sight of that. If it was easy, the whole world would be doing it and it wouldn't pay very much. Like every real estate investor going through every strategy, we're always looking for the right situation. Maybe this conversation I'm having with you today will help you as you drive down to the courthouse one day for some completely unrelated reason and you pass by a property that looks residential that should be commercial by now. How do you explore the potential of this property? Is the rezoning cost and expense and time going to be worth the increase in value if it goes from residential to commercial? Typically, every time you rezone a residential property to commercial, the value tends to go up. Sometimes it goes up dramatically. It's limited in what people can do with it when it's residential. There could be big business on this lot, except for it's not zoned to have that business activity on it. You change that zoning, you open up the income potential of a property. And that's why it can be such a meteoric rise in value when you change from residential to commercial zoning. So I would like to tell you about a case study that was very close to me. And I watched it with my own eyes. And it was very interesting to see the outcomes and everything that happened in between. There was this property and it was worth about $200,000. At least that's what they were asking for it. I thought $200,000 was pretty cheap. But as a residential house, that's really all that the property would command. The person that was living in it and the realtor that was listing it really had no commercial idea of what it was worth. And it was obvious by the price that they were asking. So I leapt on the chance to buy this property. So being the ready, fire, aim kind of investor that I am, I immediately put the property under contract for $200,000. But I gave a $500 option fee in 35 days so that I could do some due diligence before I had to perform and actually buy the property. You see, when you have a hunch something's good, you got to get it tied up and take it off the market. Worry about figuring out if it's really what you think during a due diligence period that you pay for. Actually, when you pay an option fee, you're paying for the right to cancel without being sued or having to perform. So that's what I did. As soon as I had the property under contract, I immediately hired a civil engineer. He went to work mapping out the property, drawing the boundaries, measuring the square feet, and he also started talking to the powers that be about what it would take to rezone this property. What zoning level would they give us? What rating would they give us? Would they give us zoning A, B, C3? What would they give us? And there's this whole long list of ratings. And he came back to me and said that he didn't think there was going to be much trouble because everything around this little residential house had already gone commercial. So the problem with rezoning from residential to commercial in a lot of cases is that the neighborhood, all the other residences, will protest the rezoning, and that will in effect ruin your rezoning plans because so many people come out in opposition to you. But in this case, it was surrounded by commercial property, and it was quite the opposite. All the businesses around there wanted it to be rezoned commercial as well because they were hoping that it would turn into something that I already knew I wanted to turn it into. We'll get to that in a minute. After speaking with the civil engineer, I ran my idea for that property across his table, and he thought it was a great idea. He went back to the powers to be, and the powers that be thought it was a great idea. He went around and talked to the businesses around me, immediately contiguous with my property, and they thought it was a great idea. And what I wanted to do was make it into a parking lot where people would pay to park for X amount of hours so they could shop. This was great for the courthouse across the street because there was not enough parking for everyone who needed to show up in court in that area. It was great for the businesses because there was not enough parking for customers who needed a place to park before they could come into their store and shop. So parking lot was a unanimous winner, and I knew it would be a winner for me financially because I knew that people needed to park down there. So A, the civil engineer helped me get together everything I needed to do to get the city what they needed. B, he helped me get everything together that I needed to do to get all the neighbors to sign off. And C, he mapped out how many parking spaces I could possibly put on this lot so that I could charge by the hour for people to park. Turns out I could get 50 parking spaces on this lot if and when I demolished the house. Now, before we just blow over that point real fast, be careful about just thinking you're going to demolish a house in the middle of a downtown area. Sometimes these little dilapidated houses are deemed historical by the Historical Society, which we call the Hysterical Society, and it will be a cold day in hell before they let you tear it down. So, I'm not saying that if you're even thinking about doing this that you should hire an attorney, but you probably should if you're thinking about it. But sometimes it's better just to tear the place down before you go ask. You know? Have you ever heard that? It's better to ask for forgiveness. Now, when you do that, you always run a risk. I don't know what the possible maximum fines for that is. I don't know. That's why you need to talk to your attorney. You need to talk to civil engineers. But sometimes the house just needs to fall down before all these big grand plans start showing up someplace because you might get stopped. So back to the numbers. What could this property produce in the way of income if I converted it from a residential house to a parking lot with 50 spaces? The civil engineer was also very instrumental and helpful in helping me get bids for how much it would cost to pave this property, how much the paving markings would cost, how much curb stops would cost, how much the sidewalk was going to cost, and everything the city was going to make me put in. And I was able to get all the bids and come to find out to turn this residential house into a flat parking lot, paved and marked, was going to cost me about $100,000. So now we have $200,000 for the acquisition of the property and $100,000 for all and everything to convert it to a parking lot. I have $300,000 as a basis in this property now. I did some quick estimations in the income. I figured that the property would be worth $312,000 a year in gross income. That's a pretty good deal when you can buy a property for $300,000 and you can bring in $312,000 in the first year. Now that's gross. That doesn't count property taxes or maintenance or I don't know, any kind of workers or bookkeeping or anything. But still, I don't have to think too much about this. Buying it for $300,000 and it brings in $312,000 a year minus some expenses. I'm thinking either way you cut it, this deal is a big winner. So this is how I arrived at the $312,000 a year potential income. I took 52 weeks. I multiplied the 52 weeks times 5 days because I was really only going to count on parking for 5 working days. Now I know people are going to park there on the weekends, but I'm being conservative. I'm only adding 5 days of parking out of the potential 7. 5 working days. So 52 times 5 days times 12 hours a day. I was only going to take credit for being able to have these parking spaces full for 12 hours, not the full 24 hours, because at night things would drastically go away. So being conservative, just 12 hours. Then I multiplied by the 50 spaces. There was 156,000 potential hours. At just $2 an hour, $2 an hour is very cheap. That was just the minimal. It's not unusual to charge $10 minimum, whether you're going in for 5 minutes or a half hour. You know what I mean? Some people just got to get in and get out. Whether it's $5 or $10, they're going to pay because the courthouse is right there, or where they need to shop is right there. So $2 was super conservative. You take 156 hours at $2 an hour, it's $312. And I'm leaving a lot on the table. But I'm also unsure of my expenses. So the way I'm looking at it is, it's good enough. So before I get to the number one component when it comes to rezoning a property from residential to commercial, slow down just a second and do me a favor. Hit that like button a couple of times, hit that share button a couple of times, and if you haven't subscribed, let's do it right now because there's a lot of information in all these episodes that I'm doing this year. It's unbelievable the nuggets you're going to get. The number one component that you must have when you're deciding to rezone a residential property to commercial property is you must have a civil engineer, and you need a good one. You need the best one you can hire, and this is the reason why. You're going to need someone who knows what you're up against, and you also need a reputable, well-connected, well-respected civil engineer because who they know and what they know and how they're thought of by the powers that be will have a lot to do with how fast or if this goes through at all. Not having a civil engineer is a dire mistake. And if you're going out to find the cheapest civil engineer you can find, then you don't understand. You need the most expensive one that's been there the longest, that knows the most people, that can get it all done fast. Because the amount of money that you should be able to make rezoning a property from residential to commercial should make that guy's fee look like chump change. So don't worry about the cost. Find the best guy. The cost is the least of your worries when it comes to the civil engineer. For hanging in there to the end of this episode, I want to offer you a free ebook from taxfreefuture.com. You know, they sponsor about every other one of these episodes. And the reason why they're a sponsor is, number one, they fit my audience. And number two, they are a great company. Taxfreefuture.com specializes in rolling over your IRA into a self-directed IRA where you get to choose what it's invested in, and with checkbook control, so you're no longer waiting on trustees to help you move when it's time to buy a deal. With taxfreefuture.com, self-directed IRAs and 401ks, you can move like lightning and you have checkbook control. So check out the ebook. Just go to 1000houses.com/free-stuff and scroll up and down the home page and look at all that free stuff we have. And when you see taxfreefuture.com ebook, click on that and it'll be digitally downloaded automatically, and you'll be on your way to seeing how the rich are getting richer and how they're postponing or even avoiding paying tax altogether legally. Taxfreefuture.com. Check out the ebook.